Today's dedication is for Zahn, who gave me a very generous 1 year's worth of subscriptions on Patreon. Queen Marquesa versus Surku, Narset, and Damia. And that's a decent hand. We can ramp into our control stuff, so good, not great, but we'll keep it. Been up against some stronger players online today, so I've indulged myself and allowed myself to whip out the Mardu Control Queen Marquesa deck. It will be Ixalan next week, so I've got that to look forward to. Draw into Bitter Blossom, which I'll be tempted to get down instead of the Rakdos Signet. Either way, we'll go for the tap land, the Tricycle land off the Marsh Flats. And the first spell of the game is a Tortured Existence from Surku. We draw into Path to Exile. We are likely to draw into lots of removal in this game. Now if we go for Rakdos Signet now, we can always go for our commander next turn, which, yeah, quite like the sound of that, so Rakdos Signet it is. Noteworthy that we do have a couple of Zendikar manlands in play. Burgeoning into play for Damia, wanting to ramp into the commander as soon as possible, and it's likely that there'll be some land drops from Narset thanks to a land tax. Okay, Sword of Body of Mind now doesn't give protection from any of our colours, thankfully. Now, we do have to get through some counter magic from Damia, who I imagine wants to crack this. And Damia does tend to be a bit of a control player herself, so yeah, we'll force our opponents to counter here. Alright, but we managed to get that into play, so I'm going to go straight after the Narset and start landing commander damage over there, because Narset Enlightened Master is a scary commander. Argument to be made for blowing up the land tax, actually. But we draw into another card, that is Plumb the Forbidden, should be good once Bitter Blossom starts going off. Herald's Horn now suggests that this is a tribal deck, and it is a Gorgon tribal deck apparently. Just one plains tutored out from the land tax, but instead deciding to play out a mountain. Damia has stopped playing lands from the Burgeoning, so stuck on only 3 lands at the moment. Saheeli Sublime Artificer coming down for the Narset player. Noteworthy that Damia as well didn't crack the Panorama. Surku Dimir Lobotomist into play. So we get to keep the Monarchy because no one's hit us, and draw into an Enlightened Tutor. So do we go for some ramp with Enlightened Tutor? Either way, we're getting out the Bajuka Bog this turn. And I'll just point that over at Damia. No one has anything in the graveyard yet. And we could swing in Marquesa towards the Saheeli, but it'll still be in play and ready to block the Surku, who I'm not sure would swing in towards Saheeli anyway, might try and take the Monarchy away from us. So perhaps worth holding on to the Fracture to get rid of this. Anyway, I think we have to get down the Bitter Blossom here, and we'll just play at instant speed. And we're able to draw into another land ready for next turn. No Gorgon revealed from the Herald's Horn, which is quite typical. Commander Sphere managing to keep the mana up at least, but looks like he's missing out on a land. So I'm going to go for the Fracture onto Saheeli now, because I don't want to start seeing a bunch of Servo tokens hitting play. A Smothering Tithe now from the Narset player, which also would have been worth blowing up with a Fracture. Might have to go for Unexpectedly Absent onto there. Making a treasure token. Probably the worst looking treasure token I've ever seen. I don't even know what that is. Is that a bar of some kind? How is that a treasure? Anyway, the Surku being equipped up and swinging in towards Narset. Hopefully we're all going to be ganging up on this Narset player. Went after a plains and an island previously, by the way, one of which has been played. So a wolf will enter play here, and Narset going to mill a bunch of cards. And of course we managed to keep the Monarchy, so we'll have a chump blocker held back with the Bitter Blossom. So I might be able to start swinging in myself here. So Enlightened Tutor for fast mana is okay, I think. Although, yeah, we'll still have double white for the Unexpectedly Absent, so yeah, let's try and accelerate our mana here. Alright, and that encourages our opponent to cast a Limdor's Vault in response, meaning he'll get the Sol Ring off us, so Plumb the Forbidden here, sacking the Fairy, I think. So we get 2 copies of this, draw 2 and lose 2. Obviously would rather draw more from the Plumb the Forbidden, but well worth having our Sol Ring, I think. This does unfortunately mean that the Smothering Tithe is going to make more treasures, but we managed to get into Ob Nixilis reignited, so yeah, that's fine. And exiled under the commander a Dovin Barn and an Orzhov Signet. And then we get to draw an Infernal Grasp. Could go onto this, I suppose, but there's only a finite number of spells we can cast now. So do we want the back of the Smothering Tithe? Alright, so I think would be an idea, yeah, to get down the Sol Ring here. And then we can play Unexpectedly Absent at instant speed. Yeah, I don't think Dami is going to be doing anything about it, so we'll keep them off a treasure. Let's go for the Plateau. And the Trion being tapped, and we'll put 2 into X on it, because we're not doing anything with the colourless mana either. So throwing Smothering Tithe back on top of the library. Unless our opponent has some means of protecting it here. Okay, making him use a Dovin's Veto. The Narset player well worth ganging up on, I think. Draw into another land with the Monarchy at the end of the turn. Herald's Horn finds nothing. And seeing a Death Trap Ritual here. And surprisingly, cracking the Commander Sphere. Eager for a land drop, maybe? Not managing to make it regardless, so over to Narset. Land tax grabs a couple more lands. Good to try and keep track of the land tax, because they've got 9 cards in hand at the moment, but we know 4 of them are basics. Plays out Plains. It's a Solemn Simulacrum. And our good friend Narset, Enlightened Master, coming down without haste, thankfully. So that'll have to be a Fiery Confluence to keep that out of play, I think. We can leave our commander alone, but 2 damage onto the Narset is well worth it. Okay, there's a Cryptic Spires here. I didn't know that was available on Magic Online. The Circu now turns in towards Damia, because it can't get through the Solemn, meaning we do keep our Monarchy. And now seeing a Font of Mythos, so not going to struggle to keep cards in hand this game apparently. Just need to try and keep the mana to go with it. Bitter Blossom takes us down to 34 for a fairy. And there we see some mana in Mana Crypt. Along with 2 additional cards, really playing into the Smothering Tithe here, unfortunately. But we do get into a nice little combo in Ophiomancer along with the Divine Visitation. Ophiomancer is never going to see a snake as long as the enchantment stays in play, so that means that we're going to get an angel every single upkeep. We do want to see the back of the Narset though. Play the Command Tower, the fast mana. And that gives us 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 mana. So we're 1 mana shy of the Divine Visitation, unfortunately. But I do think Narset is well worth taking out, and we can blow up the Font of Mythos with the Fiery Confluence as well. So it's going to be 1 damage twice to each creature and destroy an artifact. Go after the Mythos. And that successfully takes out the Narset. We'll draw our opponent a card with the Solemn. So do we just go for the Obnixilis then? Ready to put down Divine Visitation and Ophiomancer at the same time next turn? I think that's fine. We can hold up removal this way as well. Now we could swing in at Narset and deal some more commander damage if we blow this up and keep it away from us, which I think is fine to do, to be honest. So we'll take that down and hope that we don't see any haste. And a creature did die this turn, so Death Reap Ritual will trigger, and that will in course trigger the Smothering Tithe as well, as will the Monarchy. So we can see why I wanted rid of Smothering Tithe here, although we all know how powerful that card is by now. It's been around long enough. A Monastery Mentor also goes very well with Divine Visitation. Finally seeing a Gorgon with the artifact that is Farika's Spawn, and the Smothering Tithe up to 7 treasure tokens, managing to decrease the cost of Gorgons with an Urza's Incubator, and not holding up any coloured mana, instead just holding up this Grixis Panorama, which hasn't been cracked yet. No lands brought out with land tax. Playing a Plains, 2 cards left in hand, or 2 basic cards left in hand. And there is Narset Parter of Veils, which will switch off our additional card draw. Minusing down to look at the top 4 cards, hopefully we don't see a wheel here. Grabbing a Blasphemous Act with the Narset. Looks like it's Super Friends we're up against, a Gideon, ally of Zendikar. Throwing out a 2/2 Knight token, so it might be, our opponent's still got mana, but it might be that we have to blow this up in order to get through to the Narset. Using some of the treasure mana now in order to go for an Experimental Augury will proliferate, so that will have the Narset survive our attack, unfortunately. And a Grateful Apparition will do some more proliferating. A Waste Not suggests that this is a Nekusar style draw pain deck, along with Font of Mythos. Alright, so yeah, might not pan out for us, but let's go for the Infernal Grasp onto the Grateful Apparition, and then if they want to chump block with an ally token, then they can. But we definitely want rid of the flyer. But our opponent's got a Boros Charm to make it indestructible, so yeah, we'll have a chump blocker for the Apparition at least. Alright, a Vamp Tutor, but we can't draw into what we tutor for, unfortunately, thanks to that Narset. So we don't have to be as worried about keeping the Monarchy now at least. So I think we just swing in and see what our opponent wants to block with. We'll go after the Narset, and it might be that just going for a Ruinous Ultimatum with the Vampiric Tutor will be the thing. Throwing Gideon's Knight in the way, obviously. But we'll still give our opponent a headache and something to deal with. We'll go for... make sure we've got enough mana. Want Monastery Mentor and Divine Visitation. Maybe we could hold off on the Monastery Mentor for after a board wipe. Yeah, I think we will. So Ophiomancer into play here, followed by the Divine Visitation. And then we'll lose a life to the Obnixilis, but it's worth ticking up anyway, just in case we want to destroy a creature with it. So obviously not going to draw a card, but we'll add loyalty for the sake of a life. And then we're holding up the Vamp Tutor and the Path to Exile. Not going to draw from the Monarchy, again, thanks to the Narset. Don't think we can expect any help from the Gorgon player either, who draws a card thanks to the token going down. Continuing to make mana with that Smothering Tithe. So now Ophiomancer triggering for the first time, and thanks to the enchantment it will not be a snake, it will enter as an angel. So that will happen every single upkeep now, for as long as the Ophiomancer stays in play. Golgari Signet allows our opponent into Pyrrhica's Spawn because it costs 2 less. And looks as though he's still missing land drops here. By turn 7 only has 4 available. Able to crack the Grixis Panorama though. Alright, and does manage to make a land. It was just a bounce land, so deciding to tap out first and then bounce in a basic, I dare say. No, deciding to bring back the tapped Scry land. Ophiomancer gives us an angel again. Not to forget that our opponent does have a Blasphemous Act available, so may well want to take out the Ophiomancer. Unfortunately, with Super Friends, it is board wipe tribal typically. Narset Parter of Veils ticking down, and he did ignore the land tax again this turn. There's an Oath of Teferi, giving an emblem with the Gideon, and see if our opponent wants to attack here. Seems as though he does. Yeah, we can't target the Narset anyway, so I think we just go for the Path to Exile here. See if our opponent has any counter magic to protect this. It is successfully exiled. They could add loyalty to one of their Planeswalkers with the Oath of Teferi. Okay, yeah, of course, our opponent getting down the Temple of Mastery with the Burgeoning. I forgot all about that. Our opponent hasn't had too much use out of it, but gets a free scry. Alright, so encouraging our opponent to use that Blasphemous Act. We will put our commander in the command zone. It can luckily come down with haste, although our opponent might have a means of blocking with the Narset. So there is the Oath of Teferi, and our opponent's played a mountain, so definitely has a plains in hand. Plays the Oath of Teferi, exiling the Gideon. The Gorgon player did draw a card to the enchantment as well, so I think we just have to try and get through counter magic against the Super Friends player, really. If I had Necropotence in this deck, then I'd go for that, because obviously that's not card draw, it's just exiling the top card of the library. Although we could tutor for something else, because Narset is at only 2 loyalty now, so we could try and get down our commander and swing in over there. Don't think it would be the worst thing to get down a Ruinous Ultimatum anyway, just in case our commander can't get rid of the Narset. Anyway, we see a Diabolic Tutor from the Dimir player, which may just be counter magic. Do we go for something as easy as a Lightning Greaves or something for these angels? That means that we can take care of the Narset and it's less likely to get countered as well. Yeah, thanks to the Tutor and double blue being held up, I think we're just going to have to try out a Lightning Greaves here. I don't think that's scary enough for our opponent to try and counter, and he might just be looking to get rid of our commander. So Bitter Blossom and Divine Visitation are a good combination as well. Make potentially our only draw of the turn. And we'll have to go empty-handed here. We'll play out Monastery Mentor here so that we can make a token with the Lightning Greaves. And we'll still be able to afford our commander. So Lightning Greaves triggering the Monastery Mentor for a monk. And see if we can have the Lightning Greaves go on the angel. We can. So let's try and get down our commander as well, because we might be able to deal some damage to the Gideon as well. And then it's through to combat. The risk here being that our opponent could have spot removal for the Queen Marquesa, but yeah, we likely get rid of Gideon either way, so let's go for an angel onto Gideon, our commander onto Narset, try and get rid of both of them. Priority is being held up by the Narset player. Managing to land damage on both of them though, so the risk paid off. Will protect our commander with the Lightning Greaves, and now able to draw a card with the Obnixilis. And that gets us into a land. The Smothering Tithe will trigger. Might as well just play the land here. Okay, getting to a Planeswalker of our own, which yet again goes well with the Divine Visitation. Not used to running out of cards with this Marquesa deck, but Narset is definitely going to switch us off. Sultai banner. Turn 8 and the Gorgon player still setting up the mana unfortunately. Followed by a Simic Signet. Alright, a Chandra, Torch of Defiance, is going to potentially blow up an Angel. Although they could go for the mana, the card advantage, deciding to exile the top card of the library. And unfortunately the Gorgon player decided to give up at that. Chandra able to exile the top card twice. So we've seen yet another board wipe. Yeah, playing the Undoing version in order to wipe everything out. Taking out his own permanents as well though at least. And straight after a board wipe is the best time to get down an Elspeth Sun's champion. But yeah, seeing the back of that Smothering Tithe isn't the worst thing. Our opponent playing out a tap land there. He does still have access to this Plains, so 2 mystery cards in hand. If we get into a land next turn, we can still afford our commander. No haste from the Dimir player is likely, although he could go for the Creeping Tar Pit, but that's always a risk against the Monarch player, because it is unblockable. Una, Queen of the Fae, is a flyer that is good against the Elspeth. So we could play out Elspeth and just tick it down straight away. Okay, and into a swamp is good for our commander. I think we do just tick down the Una before it takes the monarchy away from us, although if we're just playing out the Queen Marquesa next turn, we'll just take back the monarchy anyway. But this could swing in at the Elspeth, couldn't it? So yeah, we'll deal with that as soon as it's entered. The ticking down of Elspeth won't get rid of the Narset anyway. Just need to pray that there's no haste on this side of the field, because it would be really good to keep hold of Elspeth. And we draw into a Soul Guide Lantern, which I don't think is going to be relevant. We're up against a black player, so Mass Reanimation is always a threat. Down comes Narset. Oh, of course, it does get a buff from the Gideon now, so that was an argument for us holding off on the Elspeth, I suppose. Alright, the Dimir player not doing anything. So is that a Cyclonic Rift? Wouldn't mind adding loyalty back onto Elspeth, in all honesty. We do get into a land. Can only tick up on Elspeth, so I'll do that straight away. Play the Flooded Strand. Play our commander. And then we'll get an untapped landing so that we can go for the Soul Guide Lantern now. Ready to crack it next turn and draw a card, most likely. Yeah, Scrubland should be fine. And just in case of some reanimation over here, we will take care of the Narset, exile that from the bin. And we can exile each opponent's graveyard without any mana, so yeah, here I think we're probably fine to just hold back. Not particularly interested in making an enemy of the Dimir player. And there's First Strike on the Narset, so Death Touch won't help us. Draw a D-Spark, which won't help us against it either. Why this thing has hexproof is beyond me. Always been a complaint of mine with Narset, but I'm hoping the Dimir player can deal with her. So going straight through to the attack phase. Narset only interested in landing some damage. Okay, going after the Elspeth. So not going to deal any damage here, but again, the broken thing about Narset is that it's an attack trigger as opposed to landing damage, so ignoring the Dimir player. But managing to get into a Sun's Champion of his own, a Venser, and a Vandal Blast. Our opponent can do 3, 4, and then take 2 from the soldiers, so no point in ganging up. Just block with 1. So Vandal Blast now going on to... okay. Didn't get a chance to exile in response there for some reason. That's annoying. I hope that doesn't become relevant. But yeah, what should have happened there is I exile in response each opponent's graveyard. Anyway, Elspeth Sun's Champion coming in, Venser the Sojourner as well, making 3 soldier tokens with the Elspeth. Now a Sunforger for some tutor shenanigans. And that gets equipped onto the Narset, and they were looking to unattach it there, but now seeming to, think against that. The Sojourner going to untap the Temple of the False God, now unequipping Sunforger. Aiming for a Stroke of Midnight, so our opponent blowing up the Elspeth Sun's Champion, unfortunately. Luckily we've got a means of blowing up theirs as well, and then re-equipping Sunforger. I've always got it in my head that this thing makes a 1-1 spirit for some reason. Like in the artwork it looks like someone's flying, so I just think it's a spirit, but anyway, a 1-1 human without flying. Our opponent's held off on the Cyclonic Rift, which has paid off for him because it means that the Elspeth Sun's Champion is not in play anymore and therefore not going into our hand. It did mean that he allowed an attack with Narset, which got him into a Venser and an Elspeth Sun's Champion of his own. Yeah, I think I would have done the Cyclonic Rift before the attack, personally. Anyway, this will give us a free attack against the Narset player at least. Teferi's Puzzle Box means that we are going to lose our D-Spark, but we'll draw a couple of cards at least, thanks to Narset being in our hand, or Marquesa being in our hand. It'll go back to the command zone, obviously. And now a Whir of Invention, where X is 1. Noteworthy that he didn't put additional mana into that, so Dimir Guildgate is untapped because our opponent wants a 3 mana spell. Alright, and that is a dark deal, so we're going to go down a card here. Oh, and gets us into Liliana, Dreadhorde General. We're not going to be able to keep, unfortunately. But that was our opponent's plan all along, clearly. Managing to get rid of a couple of commanders, as well as some powerful planeswalkers as well. So hopefully our opponent got into a worse hand. The planes would finally have been discarded as well. Yeah, our opponent had a Vanquish the Horde in hand. Just so many board wipes in these Super Friends decks. Part of the reason that I stopped playing Super Friends, because of all the board wipes. It's not particularly fun to play against, I imagine. There is a Wear and Tear. Could go after this, but I don't think it really matters. I'd rather see the additional cards. Okay, managed to get into some Planeswalker removal. So play the Smouldering Marsh. And back in for our commander, I think. And definitely turning in sideways towards the Narset. Although we're nowhere near taking this player out. We drew into a Cavern of Souls at the end of the turn, which we're not going to be able to play either of these anyway. Could do this on the upkeep if we feel as though we have to. Rather not go down a card though. A Delvin Hand of Control this time, which will make artifacts, instants and sorceries cost less. Followed by a Luca, Wayward Bonder. Luca returning a creature from graveyard to the battlefield. Targeting with that a Stoneforge Mystic to get a tutor. And it's a Lightning Greaves our opponent's gone after. Yeah, mainly for haste on the Narset. I think it already has hexproof. Noteworthy that if our opponent has another equipment available, he could cheat it in with the Stoneforge Mystic, because it does have haste. And this only gets exiled at the beginning of their next upkeep. But instead deciding to just attack us, so taking the Monarchy. Wasn't playing around haste, of course. So we are going to get a token with Death Touch and Haste if our commander survives through the upkeep. Decided to tap out during the turn cycle, so doesn't have any means of interaction apparently. Wow, so many Planeswalkers this game, and Ashiok Dreamrender means that we're not going to be able to tutor. See how long it takes me to forget about that. Hopefully we'll exile this player's graveyard, or exile both of our graveyards, I don't mind, but as long as this one goes down, because I've got a feeling that stuff can be reanimated here. The Creeping Tar Pit, finally making use of that against a walker. So taking out the Looker first before ticking this down, I imagine. Yep, now doing it. So exiling both graveyards and going to mill them first. Managing to get off them there a Spark Double, a Chandra, Acolyte of Flame and an Architect of Thought. We will get the Assassin token and have an option to blow up the Dovin with the Murderous Rider, but like I said before, I'd rather have the additional card draw here. Darkside Extortionist, I mean the board's been wiped now, so that's not as good anyway. We will take the 3 different cards. Alright, that's looking better. An Arena Rector we could actually blow up with the Dismember if we wanted to. So Arena Rector in the way of the Narset could be alright. So yeah, I think we definitely want to be swinging in both of these into the Dovin, and then if they want to tick this down at some point, then they'll have to kill it off. But we're ignoring life totals this whole time while we're dealing with all these walkers is the problem. So, do we just ignore the Dovin? I think we're fine to actually just start trying to deal some damage to the player himself. And this way we can obviously take the Monarchy back. So we'll get down the Arena Rector and keep hold of Grasp of Fate, try and keep hold of Dismember as well for the sake of seeing more cards thanks to the Puzzle Box. Drawing to an Arcane Signet from the Monarchy. But it's just the Lightning Greaves our opponent gets out, doing that before having to shuffle it away with the Puzzle Box, so yeah, Stoneforge Mystic with haste doing some work there. And the fact that Looker kept it in until the upkeep makes a difference. Usually you have to exile it at the beginning of your end step. Slayer's Stronghold is a means of vigilance and haste. Casmina can make a wizard token, and the static ability on that could actually be relevant. Ashes of the Abhorrent. Players can't cast spells from graveyards. Not really worried about that whilst the graveyards are being exiled. And then we'll loot and make a 2/2 wizard. Getting rid of board wipe number 27, a time wipe. Lightning Greaves goes on to the 3/3. So now that it's got Shroud, not able to give it the +2 buff with this. So that might suggest that he's not interested in that and instead wants to hold up his 2 cards. The 3/3 swings in at us. So does he have removal for a planeswalker that we'd go after? Yeah, something's fishy there, so I think our opponent might just be trying his luck in getting through to us to get the monarchy, but I think we allow it here. I think he's got removal for a planeswalker. Now a demonic tutor from the Dimir player. Hopefully has a means of refilling his hand. Alright, going for a windfall. So assuming that this player doesn't use any cards, we're going to draw 3. So we might as well try and use the Dismember here. And if they've got removal for that planeswalker that we think they might have, then so be it. So that dies. Our opponent gains a life to the ashes. And the Arena Rector does die, so we'll get to search out a planeswalker. Oh, and what was I saying? I forgot. I did say. How long will it take me to forget? Yep, can't search with the Arena Rector thanks to the Ashiok. Doit. Alright, a Field of the Dead drew into Dockside Extortionist. We're not going to keep any of this thanks to the Teferi's puzzle box anyway. Creeping Tar Pit can take out, hopefully, the Casmina. Might take the monarchy away from our opponent though. So yeah, obviously should have just held on to the Arena Rector there in hope that we can get rid of this at some point. I always forget about the static on this. Creeping Tar Pit is taking out the Planeswalker. So commander damage from the Queen Marquesa might actually be relevant this game. Don't think he ticked down the Ashiok there either. We get another assassin thanks to our opponent controlling the monarchy. And Narset is holding up priority. Alright, and unfortunately the Super Friends player has disconnected here, so we'll hope that this is a genuine disconnect and that he's back in a minute. Alright, and that player timing out, which is absolutely incredible. So we get the monarchy back. Yeah, I'm not sure how that's supposed to work, but we'll assume that it's correct. Magic Online, nothing could go wrong. Maybe it's just the next player's turn who gets it. Anyway, it's our turn now, so Grave Pact, Dockside and the lands go into the library. And we draw a fresh grip, just a bunch of lands and a Blasphemous Act, pretty useless. So I'll get down the tap land just in case we need to play our commander again. And we'll go after this Ashiok because apparently I'm going to try and tutor at some point again and forget about that. And we are the Monarchs, so draw at the end of the turn into a Painful Truths, could have done with that. Circu back into play. And playing a black spell into that, a Sanitarium Skeleton will exile the top card of our library. And then back down to 0 cards in hand, but getting out a Phyrexian Metamorph could be a copy of the Queen Marquesa perhaps. And that's exactly what our opponent does, so could hit us but gains the monarchy anyway here. If we're at 15 life, might as well take some more from us, knocking us down to 12. Get another assassin token here, meaning we can go wide on our opponent and take the monarchy away before potentially wiping the board maybe. We will draw another card, again it is card advantage, but 5 cards being shuffled into the box now. Okay, and into a Toxic Deluge, which, yeah, we've got a bunch of 3 toughness on the board, so I don't think that particularly helps. But I think going down some cards here should be fine. Play the planes, again, in case we need to play our commander again. And then let's get some lifelink damage on the go, because we're teetering on quite a low life total here. Don't know if I mentioned wiping the board previously with a Blasphemous Act in hand. I might have been forgetting about the Teferi's puzzle box. Luckily we've got into the Deluge anyway. So swinging with everything. I assume my opponent is not going to block here. Blocking some commander damage with the skeleton, but taking 4 to the assassins. So yeah, not much point getting down the Bastion Protector here. It'll die to the Toxic Deluge and debuff the Queen Marquesa when it dies, which will then have this die as well. So yeah, we'll keep the card in hand for the sake of seeing more next turn. Toxic Deluge with 3 life here. Noteworthy it was an austere command under the Circu as well. I didn't show you that previously. Marquesa back in the command zone yet again. And I think the True Conviction was well worth getting in there. Draw into the Cavern of Souls again. So I don't mind seeing the back of any of these cards. Sanitarium Skeleton activated there, and that comes back into play. I think our opponent must have played a land there because only 1 card in hand, and it is a Mesmeric Orb. 52 cards left in our library. Activating the Creeping Tar Pit, we're going to struggle to keep the monarchy because of that. But at least we'll be able to get into the Queen Marquesa again next turn and get the monarchy down straight away. Obviously depends on what we draw into. So during the upkeep we will mill a bunch. It may well be that we go down to the Mesmeric Orb this game. Spent a hell of a lot of time and resources dealing with that Narset player. Well, clearing a decent number of lands off the top at least. Yeah, in all that, I think the only things we really cared about, Bedevil and Swords to get rid of either the Creeping Tar Pit or Swords on this would be useful. Loyal Apprentice is good as well. Draw before the puzzle box triggers. Strip Mine onto the Creeping Tar Pit would be handy, but not going to keep it. Alright, I'm landing ourselves some stuff here. A Young Pyromancer, the Kaya. Skull Clamp can't trigger the Young Pyromancer, unfortunately. But Smothering Tithe with Teferi's Puzzle Box in play is going to be decent. So I think it's worth getting all this stuff down. May well have counter magic over here that we should maybe play around, but not going to be too worried about that. Our opponent is holding up priority, so the Skull Clamp threat against the Young Pyromancer might be enough to have our opponent counter, but apparently not. So we'll throw out the Kaya as well, completely emptying our hand. And then we'll tick up on the Kaya for the Young Pyromancer so that it's a better blocker. And if they decide to blow it up, then we'll get it back. And obviously that keeps some decent amount of loyalty on the Kaya as well. Our opponent's still the Monarch, so we'll get a card draw at the end of the turn. We'll start making some mana with the Smothering Tithe so we don't have to tap down as many lands if we don't want to. A Hostage Taker, that is creatures, yeah, creatures and artifacts. Can obviously get through to the Kaya with the Creeping Tar Pit as well if he wants to. Deciding to take out the Pyromancer. So we get a Spirit Token thanks to the Kaya. And the Young Pyromancer going to be put into our hand, which means we're not going to keep it, of course. A Loxodon Warhammer, so that will be 3 to equip, so they can't equip it onto the Tar Pit. They could put it on this and swing in though, so the chances of us getting that emblem aren't all that high. Yeah, equipping it onto there and leaving the Tar Pit alone. Wouldn't have blocked with the Spirit Token anyway here, I don't think. Although if we block, they only get 3 points of damage through, and that means that we take out the Skeleton and have the Kaya at 3 loyalty, meaning we can exile the non-land permanent. I think we want to keep the Puzzle Box because it's really good against the Smothering Tithe. Maybe we want to blow up Mesmeric Orb. Is it better than Skull Clamping on the Spirit Token is the question. Yeah, I'm going to risk just taking the damage here because I want to be able to take the Monarchy away from my opponent with the Spirit as well. And if we can draw more cards, then we can draw into removal for the Orb. Now throwing the Warhammer onto the Hostage Taker and drawing a card at the end of the turn means we get a treasure. Losing a bunch more cards to the Mesmeric Orb, we go down to 30 cards left in the library. Teferi's Protection we don't want to cast anyway, so throw that back. Gets us into a land, a Lingering Souls as well. So, do we take the Monarchy first? Double check on the cost of Marquesa. Cost 12 mana, meaning we'd have 5 mana left if we dropped a land, so we could go Lingering Souls twice, but we want to get some Skull Clamp stuff in as well. So we could play Queen Marquesa now, and then she could just hold a Skull Clamp. We'd obviously have the Monarchy. Does our opponent block the Queen Marquesa so that we can gain some life with this? Do you have to worry about Trample now? But holding back a Death Toucher could be a good deterrent. Yeah, let's go for Queen Marquesa now. Risky tapping down all my lands here, but we want to be getting into removal for that Mesmeric Orb anyway. So we steal the Monarchy away. Tick up with the Kaya onto the Queen Marquesa. And then we'll swing in with the Spirit Token to gain a couple of life before we clamp it. Hopefully the Warhammer will just go in towards the Kaya. And if they go in after us for the Monarchy, it's not the worst thing because we'll be able to get rid of the Orb with this then. But there's still that Creeping Tar Pit to think about. Just treading water against my opponent really. So now during the second main, clamp onto the Spirit. Draws us into a Tevesh Sat. Reflecting Pool we can play here. Can't afford that Tevesh Sat now, annoyingly. So I think it's just going to have to be the Lingering Souls and we can go for the Skull Clamp again. Not going to be able to make use of the actual cards we draw into apart from wheeling them away with the box. And the Lingering Souls has flashback, so we'll be able to make use of that with the Clamp next turn as well. So Spirit Token goes down to a Skull Clamp straight away. Okay, and just clearing lands off the top anyhow. Draw a card because we're the Monarch. Draw into a Cathar's Crusade with that. A Dread has hit the bin, so shuffle it into its owner's library. Means our opponent can't be milled out. Creeping Tar Pit being animated with 1 card in hand. Our opponent's played a tap land. So we can get rid of some creatures here thanks to the double strike. But Creeping Tar Pit will get through. Where do they want to attack is the question. Throwing the Warhammer onto the Tar Pit. So only attacking him with one creature maybe. They're going in at the Kaya, which gives us another turn life-wise, but we definitely need to see an answer for that Mesmeric Orb now, because we're going to go down a hell of a lot of cards next turn. We're only going to have a finite number of cards left in the deck to do anything. Alright, and our opponent just going straight through to the end step, so looking for us to be milled out here, which is always an interesting way to lose. Now drawing into the Jeska's Will again. So if we want to up our chance of getting into that again, then we could shuffle with Fetch Land if we're able to get into any more here. Nothing to play at instant speed though. So with 10 cards in the library, we'll put these back and pray that we've got some removal left. No, we've got nothing. We've seen all the same cards again. I can't actually remember what we've drawn into during all this. So let's just help the chance along here. We'll go for the Painful Truths, I think. Okay, there was a Teferi's Protection, which doesn't particularly help. Might as well play the Bastion Protector, I suppose. Strip Mine can get rid of the Pit. And we do obviously go down a land there, but Creeping Tar Pit has done a lot of work for our opponent this game. Don't see that card anywhere near enough. Probably the best man land there is. And then we've still got access to the Lingering Souls, so we'll go for that. And just turning sideways. Don't have enough time to get our opponent at this point. We don't have any combos in the deck or anything like that. It's just a means of it's just a deck where we want to whittle our opponent's resources away with removal and control. Unfortunately, that all went onto the Narset player, seemingly. So the skeleton goes in the way of the Queen Marquesa, meaning we only get first strike damage. And then we'll go for Skull Clamp onto the tapped token. Might as well play the Young Pyromancer. Jeska's Will exiles the top 3 cards. And we'll gain a red mana back thanks to our opponent having a card in hand. Get a 1/1 Elemental from the Pyromancer. See how different interactions in the deck work here. We just haven't got into it in the right order, unfortunately. Really got slowed down by that Parter of Veils before. So now with 2 cards left in the library, we've got access to the Tevesh Sat and the Cathar's Crusade, neither of which we can afford. So let's draw with the Skull Clamp on a Spirit and back into a couple of lands. So 0 cards in hand now. We will end it all with an Elemental, and it's good game to my opponent. So there we are, yeah, really getting slowed down by the Narset player there. It's a damn shame that games are warped like that by players scooping. But it was a fun way to lose at least. I was worried we were going to go down to Super Friends and 57 board wipes, but getting milled out by Mesmeric Orb's always interesting. So hopefully you all enjoyed this one. Ixalan will begin next week, so look forward to that. And a massive thank you to the patrons for their support of the channel. I'm tribalkai. Thank you for watching.